actually recently read an interesting article, and I think it was a veterinary nurse publication because I get those through work. And it was talking about the GI symptoms or nutritional management of brachycephalic dogs because of some of the problems that you see with the brachycephalic obstructive airway. Um, so a lot of the regurgitation that you see was part of it. And then they just talked about, to me it was just, and it's unfortunate that I don't have it with me to kind of peek at it better, but it was talking about the different abnormalities that create what would be considered GI symptoms. So regurgitation was one of the big ones that they were discussing, and that sometimes the correcting of it through surgery does actually help with some of those things that people see. Other times it's not quite enough, just because. So I thought, as a general person in these dogs and seeing posts that you see, you don't see a ton of people commenting on that portion of owning a breeder. I don't. I guess I do actually hear a lot of owners commenting on that portion of having the brachycephalics, the Frenchies in my case, but you don't see a lot of breeders talking about that. I don't feel. Have you seen a lot of that?
No, I think I've I've seen some people who I guess maybe actively show their dogs have discussed it on a few couple different podcasts, but no like bigger breeders that I've seen that got deep into a discussion on that level.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it you just kind of having brachycephalic breeds so much in my life, you just kind of take it as second nature.
Yeah. We make it normal.
Yeah, you don't really think about it until you hear or see the consequences that are coming from such issues.
Yeah. I just thought it was super interesting that it was getting prevalent enough and they're popular enough now that that's something that is being addressed in the veterinary clinic. So that was why it was like, the gal who wrote the article is a nutrition. She's a technician, but she's been a technician for a very long time, and well known in the technician field as we've gone to lectures or bigger continuing education meetings. A lot of times she's lecturing. She started the veterinary technician specialist in nutrition. She is a specialist, so like a specialized nurse in nutrition. So she has a lot of that. So it was somebody who's got a lot of years behind her as far as experience, a lot of education behind her, and then putting that out simply because in clinic you are seeing more of that now as these dogs have become popular and more people have them. And that's something that, uh, does, unless you live with them as a veterinary professional, unless you have brachycephalics, it's hard to know what somebody would be describing, talking about, and it's frustrating. I would tell you. I have some of my dogs have different degrees of that. One of the puppies I produced is pretty terrible, honestly, with it, and it's been frustrating to have to school the client through it, because to me I can pretty easily be like, well, this is what's going on, and I can set forth the things that I need to do with my dog to try and manage the situation, but it's hard to get other people to be compliant in some of those things. And therefore, it's frustrating. But I think it's, again, just interesting that it's coming out enough now that she felt it was a good time to write this article and kind of educate it. It's for educating veterinary staff members to how to go about working these up and how to talk to clients about it and some of the things to try with it. So I think it's something to watch.
Do you remember what some of the things that they said to try?
Yeah, it was kind of, of course, they're always going to want further diagnostics to make sure that you don't have something like a hiatal hernia, which what that is that would be a hole in the diaphragm where then the stomach or, parts of the intestines can slide in and out up into the chest cavity, which would, obviously cause regurgitation or vomiting or problems. So they want further diagnostics for that, but just in general, they said one of the things was like elevated food bowls, and they actually, and it's, again, unfortunate I don't have it, they had the name of some company that had, the bowls were tilted at 45 degrees or some crazy thing that was supposedly helpful, slowing them down so that they're not getting so much gas in with eating. So they said like adding water, making it a softer food anyways rather than a kibble. So even if you're doing a kibble, add water. Then there was, and I'm not going to speak very, very hard on this, but again, if there's interest, I could always pull. I have the article at work. I just left it there. I can pull it, but there was something about, I want to say, messing with the fiber and the protein levels to help it be digested more or go through faster, because you've got a delay in the stomach, and then that's when they're running around or doing whatever, and then they regurg. It's because there's a delay of the food leaving the stomach, so it comes back up faster, or hours after, however you want to say that. So there was that. Let me think of what else. Those are the things I can remember off the top of my head. Elevated food, trying to get them to slow down so that they're doing less gas. And then I think it was lower fiber, because fiber slows things down. And it does a better job of explaining than I really do in the end. I can kind of break it down into common terms, but it's just an interesting thing that's what we're having to we're having to counsel clients on.
Mm-hmm. Well, my 11-year-old English Bulldog, he was having a lot of problems, and we couldn't figure out why, and we really still haven't gotten the full answer to it. But one of the suggestions was elevate him while he's eating, soften up his food, and some of the
elevate his food bowl or elevate himself.
Elevate his food bowl.
Got it.
But and then soften up his food. So we decided that we went, he's 11, so we went with the wet food. So we're letting him eat canned food now, and he's done a lot better with that.
Yeah.
And but he doesn't like eating it out of a bowl. And so the solutions that we had was to basically spoon feed him. And it's worked out pretty well. He hasn't aspirated or anything like that. And he hasn't regurgitated nearly as much since we went to those measures.
Yeah. Do you feel like that got worse as he got older?
Yes.
As far as the signs?
Yeah, he would get, like, every year since we've had him, he would get sick once a year. And it was always kind of similar, and they chalked it up to aspirated pneumonia or whatever. But the older he got, the more it became obvious that he was having a constant problem. Like he was drinking excess water.
Mm-hmm.
The dry food was just like drying him out, I guess. I don't know what it was. And then he'd regurgitate the water, and then he'd get the pneumonia, and it was just like a vicious circle. But ever since we went to the wet food and spoon feeding him, he's done way better. He still has a little regurgitation every once in a while, but not nearly as much. But definitely it got worse as he got older.
Which is, to me, I think one of the things that I kind of went through and kind of skimmed the article again. They said in this is that if a dog by the age of 5 hasn't shown any symptoms of BOAS, then it's probably a good indicator that they won't. That they're doing they're okay, as okay as they can be. I think that's going to be a matter of, it's subjective.
Yeah.
I never know when people are like, yeah, they're a good breather. I never really know what they consider a good breather. So that's to me, I mean, you do have the grading function now that you can go off of if you're doing that. And, I think a regular person can look at those guidelines and try and kind of figure out their dog on their own. And, sure, it's nice to have a trained professional doing that, but at the same time, a little bit of common sense, you can kind of do that yourself. And if you can be honest with what you're dealing with, then that's helpful too. But yeah, as they get older, it does get worse.
Yeah.
Most of the signs. I think that 5-year-old cutoff is interesting because how many people are waiting until their dogs are 5 to breed them to really say that this dog is really not affected with BOAS. And I don't know, as far as, I'm not as up on the OFA trialing of it because it's, it's only been in certain places. I don't know if it's something that they have to do each year, because to me it would seem like you would have to retest each year to say that the dog is actually clear. Just common sense wise, knowing that they get worse as they get older, you should have to retest yearly to really be able to say that your dog is cleared of that. A lot like eyes, you're supposed to retest them every year. And I think it's just a super interesting, the way that it's just reflected in as the popularity has grown and what we're seeing. And then the counseling it's difficult. What I was reading made a lot of sense to me, and it's a lot of what I had already done and had counseled people to do. But it's nice to see somebody put down the science behind it,
Yeah, for sure. I think that the more we know, the better equipped we are to make some decisions that may be considered hard now, but maybe in the future people will realize that, certain things that aren't very popular or looked down upon will be easier to make in the future, without getting into like specifics, because I don't want to. Yesterday I I felt bad for the kid that called in, and I'm still a little ignorant about a lot of this stuff and what's considered passable and what's not considered passable in the French Bulldog world, but
yeah,
the thing
and his concern was something that 99% of them have 1 or 2 copies of that. That's fixed in the breed. You're not going to find very many that are clear.
Right.
So if that was a breeding decision, like any breeder would say, you breed the dog. That would not be an eliminating factor in breeding that dog.
Right. And
because you can't get around it.
Right. And that was something that I might have misspoken, so I'm hoping that eventually I try to reconnect, but I don't have his information. But because I wanted to convey that message, like after I spoke with you, it just was clear on what was going on, what he was saying. But for me, it's one of those things like where my like I could talk a lot of stuff, and then I can get involved into the emotions of it, or getting into like the frustrations of people not listening or not even trying to listen. But at the end of the day, for me, like it's not about me trying to be right or wrong. I just where I think that I want to convey the message the most is that these dogs are not easy to own, and you have to be prepared to do some things now to if you're especially if you're going to breed or you're going to like in my case use your dog in a breeding situation. Like you just got to be prepared to deal with some of the things that come with these dogs. Like you're gonna have to take extra care of them because they're not a dog that you can leave out in the weather too long. And just little things like that, and then if look at the signs of Boaz or any, you know, make sure you're getting their X-rays and doing all the things that you might never would have done with any other types of breeds. But these are the kinds of dogs that take a little work to own, and maybe
And
at
maybe
the
not
end,
even as puppies. You know,
yeah,
you
right,
might skate through your puppy 2-3 year
right,
old stage,
exactly.
and everything's rosy, and then as they get older, things get a little.
Yeah,
They sure don't age well. I will tell you that. Like coming into the clinic, you're like,
yeah,
ugh.
most don't.
A lot of them don't look too good. And I think that's just the confirmation, and that's not good, bad, or the otherwise. It's just you know,
Yeah, no, for sure.
a different breed of dog just ages more gracefully.
Yeah, yeah. Pugs always kind of like you could always tell an older pug.
Ugh, yeah, all your breakies, you know, even your Boston
Yeah,
Terriers, like, oh
yeah,
god,
yeah,
they're just a little creepy as they get older, and I say that in the best possible way. Having
yeah,
dealt with aged of those breeds, you know, in clinic, that and the diseases that they get, and the
yeah,
side effects from those diseases is just they're and I think too the level of care. I think people get tired as they get older, and that care ramps up, and you know, making sure that they're as clean as they could be in all their folds and their noses are taken care of, and you know, all of that, you start to somewhat get a little bit burnt out on that, maybe would be a word to say. I don't know exactly, but it's constant. It's constant maintenance. So if you're not doing that, they look rough. They're not that they're not loved. They just don't age nice.
yeah,
They're
yeah. It's
aging
one of
like me over here, not like Jennifer Aniston. They're aging like Jenn
yeah,
Kruse.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just one of those things where I feel sometimes I veer out of my lane, and my lane I just kind of was a little reflective last night. Like my lane isn't necessarily to um, like get into a wild debate of what's going to be a better French bulldog or what's the validity of all the health testing if you're not going to change the conformation of the dog. Um, I'm going to continue to learn, and I'm going to continue to share those things and talk to people who have are smarter than me, like yourself, and that have good opinions and can bring some levity to a situation. And but that's not where my lane is with what I'm doing here. My lane is to let people know that if you're going to get these dogs, be prepared that this is a lifelong commitment, and we're not talking just a typical dog, you know, person relationship commitment. It's like you said, it's work and they don't age gracefully, and you can't do the same things as you can do with other dogs, and it might not be worth it for a lot of people. And I hope that maybe that's the decision that people make, like that podcast that I shared to you the other day, like them giving people all the information and all the pitfalls of owning these breeds. Part of me is like, okay, they're doing it because they just purely don't like these dogs and would never own them. But another part of me is like, okay, yeah, give these people as much information as possible. Don't sell them a bed of roses. Tell them the truth, like what could happen, and what are the things that you need to do to help keep these dogs healthy or healthy enough. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
and if
I,
if any of that is going to be an issue, don't get into that world at all. Get yourself a lab.
labs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, and I would tell you, like, the two medical people, to some degree, like, I can always understand where someone's coming medically from this,
Mm-hmm.
in as much as that, you know, you gotta use that term healthy subjectively once again. That's a subjective term when it comes to brachycephalic, and
Yeah.
I think that's an okay thing to say. People, what other people think is healthy, I'm not sure that a strict medical person is going to be like, oh yeah, I agree with that, because I would tell you the science isn't there to agree with that. The things that you see in clinic, trainers too, I think, I mean, I can't imagine that, like, what a trainer deals with in dealing with people that have these breeds and trying to school them. I think one of the gals was a trainer in that podcast. That's why I'm saying that. I do think they're probably looking at the physicality, that the dog has limitations, but then they're so cute and funny that a lot of them aren't particularly well trained in as much as, like, to do that care. So you've got a dog that requires a lot of care, and people who can't get that care done because the dog hasn't been taught, I guess, to accept that or to participate in those kinds of activities.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them are, but again, like, you know, if you've got a dog that's going to get reoccurring ear infections and you can't medicate the ears because it just, you know, that those types of things, from a training perspective, I guess I could see. I don't know that I mean, that can be just as relevant in the lab or in any breeds. This, you know, client compliance in medical management of their dogs is a very, very frustrating thing. So I think if you can have a dog with less medical needs, the better it is, because your average client really does struggle to do what needs to be done if it's a complicated animal. Does that make sense?
No, I agree 100%.
And the old thing, I would say, get the pet insurance. I know everybody has strong opinions about pet insurance, but to me, if you get it when they're any dog, when you get it when they're a puppy, you've got it before they've got any pre-existing conditions. Yes, it does cost money, and I always tell people, some years the insurance company wins, and some years I win. I don't want to win. I rather not have a major issue that I have to then get my money back out of you know, the insurance company. But it has certainly, in my case, has made the difference between whether or not I could feel comfortable making a substantial financial decision and not being guaranteed that my dog would make it, and know that, you know, I was willing to take that chance because that I had that insurance to repay. Even if I didn't end up with my dog, I still, you know, wouldn't be out X amount of money. That's kind of a gruesome way of looking at it, but at the time it was a very nice thing to have, to not have to be like, oh my God, I can put, and this is a foreign body surgery that, oh gosh, had to have been at this point 7 years ago. I don't know. Foreign body surgery, went in, got the item out, and 2-3 days later, we had a bad abscess up underneath in the area of the incision that then migrated into the abdomen. So we had a septic abdomen. So went back in, and that was, I think he was in the hospital for 5 days with, he had to have a drain, an abdominal drain, but they had to, they were monitoring and emptying to get him back right. And I feel like at that point, 7 years ago, I had to put $6,000 just flat down. And his prognosis was not super. But knowing I could just do that and take that chance, and that I would be getting that money back, made that an easier choice, where I didn't have to really consider, what's my comfort level in spending $6,000 and having a 20% chance that my dog's going to live. Those are the things that you have to think about in those times where you're faced with stuff like that. Some people, it depends on the person, I guess, but I don't have endless amounts of money, so I have to think about that. Despite what I do for a living, I still, and maybe that makes me more practical about it. I don't know, where I'm not, and it came down to, like, I think it covered all but $1,000 of it. So, and he lived for another 6 months, because then he ended up getting cancer. So a little bit different, totally different, reason to go down, but
right.
Could have never predicted that. But
yeah, I agree with you. If you're going to get these kinds of dogs, pet insurance is probably the way to go.
It's a good investment. It's a good safety net. Again, depends on your coverage. Everybody can get, you can monkey around with how it's covered to get prices within your budget. You have to know, as they age, it's going to go up. So pluses or minuses to it, but I've found it very helpful. For sure.
Yeah, no. Yeah, you convinced me.
Yeah. And I always tell people, if the veterinary office does care credit, that's a really nice option too, because a lot of them will offer an extended, like a 6 month same as cash or whatever. So you always are going to have to pay your bill pretty much up front. There's a few insurances that I guess they pay, and I have a hard time with that, because working in clinic, I don't necessarily relish the thought of trying to get money for things before, no matter how easy they make it. I resist that. I probably need to get a little more educated about it, but I resist having to do more steps when we already are functioning with, staffing shortages. So,
right.
Most of them, you pay whatever your bill is, and then you submit your invoice. Most of them then contact the veterinary clinic for records, and that gets through them. But a lot of times you can get, you should be able to get money back before too long, and get that, majority of that care credit paid off before the promo expires. So that's a nice option. I've been using, it was called VIP pet insurance 100 years ago. I think it turned into Nationwide. So I've been using them for a really long time. And then I have a couple policies through Fetch, and different pluses and minuses with both of them. But overall, pleased with both. Certainly have clients using all different kinds of ones out there too. So it's a funny thing. There's so many different plans out there. We do get asked pretty frequently, what does my insurance cover? And I'm like, I have no idea.
Right.
That's something you bought it. You tell me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of red tape and whatever to look at, but they all have a little bit different um, different things that they cover and ways that they cover it. So.
Right.
Well, and I think a lot of that might be honesty. I mean, I think like if you're breeding your own dogs together, you know what they are and what they. I mean, are you looking? How clearly you're looking at it? Or it's never going to hurt to actually look at what people say that is negative about the breed and try and determine, do they have a leg to stand on. Always have to pay attention to your source, and what their underlying motive is.
Yeah.
Like certain groups don't want anybody breeding anything. So you just gotta, in everything, do your due diligence and really look at the source material and who they're being funded by and if they align with your principles. Because everyone can have different ideas on that as well. But I think when you go outside, I don't know, it's hard. To me, I wonder a lot. I guess if you're going outside and you're seeing the dog somewhere regularly, maybe you're getting a better idea of health.
Yeah. You know what's so interesting was that Dalmatian episode. That's probably been my favorite episode on Functional Breeding Podcast or whatever. I listened to that one twice because it was just really cool to, I guess, to really hear the trials and tribulations of people that are actually trying to
actually make an improvement
and do something that would be considered outside, coloring outside the lines, I guess, and how the AKC was actually the ones to step in and say, no, these dogs are good. And it was the breed club that was so resistant to everything.
That might be kind of across the board, though, because by the time you've gone to the breed club, and I'm not speaking from experience, but I'm just shooting from the hip here. By the time you've gone through all the steps to get to that point, the nature of it is going to be exclusive, right? Because you've had to cross all these hurdles to be able to be a part of that. So then maybe the gatekeeping on that is even more.
And honestly, I could see myself getting involved in that, or when I was younger or whatever. I'm not, again, my frustrations or whatever towards that community, if I sit back and I think about it, like, okay, I get it. And I could see myself at one point in my life being that way as well. But just the fact that I do own these dogs, I feel like I have and I've owned them all pretty much all my life, whether it's pugs or English bulldogs, so I feel like I have a little bit of a leg to stand on as far as that's concerned. But so I'm not like disrespecting people that are involved in the breed club and consider themselves preservation breeders or whatever, and they want to keep things exclusive. I get that. I mean, you don't want somebody to take a turd in the punch bowl that doesn't belong and doesn't have good intentions. But we're at the point now where science is catching up with a lot of these breeds, and we're realizing that there are things that we could do to mitigate some of these problems that we have, and it may take some bold decisions, and people should get on board and go for it. And so I was listening also to what was that? What's her name? She's from my neck of the woods originally. She has that Pure Dog Talk.
Yeah, Laura Reeves.
Laura Reeves. She was doing a roundtable with some show breeders and exhibitors, and they were talking a lot about what I'm kind of alluding to now is the exclusivity of it and how they maybe need to open up and take a little more risk. And she was on the lines of like, you're not gonna, you maybe take a little more risk and get your dogs into the hands of people, and if they screw you over, they screw you over. You know what I mean? To really fully um, be a preservation breeder, you need to maybe take the risk, and because the reward could be better at the end of the road than if you just hold on to everything and not keep everything so exclusive. You're not really preserving anything at this point, and um, you're not bringing people into the fold and bringing them into the community. You're just excluding people, and I'm all about excluding dummies, but you could just be so
That would be
exclusive
everyone.
that you're shooting yourself in the foot. Is what I'm basically trying to say.
Yeah, for that, I would think for that sport, that would be an interesting thing to survey. I don't know how they would survey that, but that would be an interesting, like,
Yeah, and
yeah,
she was talking about like her German wire, her pointers. She would rather have more people involved in her dogs than less. You know, there's multiple ways of promoting your program in the breed by just this small little niche. So it was interesting to hear somebody that's been a life, second
yeah,
generation dog
yeah,
lady
right.
actually say that. So I was encouraging.
Well, you have to guess that they might hit critical points. Like, I don't know what would cause that, like the attendance of the dog shows going down, or as far as the entries. I don't know enough about dog shows to say, but like, what would be the parameters? I don't know if somebody could enlighten us. What are the parameters that you would be looking for to say that this sport is starting to wither away? I think I've seen articles here and there about it. Um, and what do they, what's their ideas
Right.
for? Boy, there was all that craziness about these not these people in the sport not getting background checked, and all the hubbub. I was like, oh my god, which that was interesting when that was kind of sneaking around
Yeah, or
shortly, not too long ago.
yeah, where one of the situation was one of the people worked for OFA as well that was involved in this social degeneracy that people were like scrambling to find out like how many pay for play OFA clear hits got passed through because they were part of this little weird.
Yeah, and see, I hear breeders talking about that all the time. Like, oh,
Yeah.
they'll just pass whatever, and I'm like, what? I mean, like, is that really like people? I guess I have not been in a lot of contact with veterinarians who are like willing to, just sweep things under the rug, as far as like say, yeah, that dog looks great when it, clearly doesn't. But I guess it happens. It kind of blows my mind when you think. I've come across people who just think that's the way it is across the board, and I would tend to go the opposite direction, where like I've never met one, never met a veterinarian that would be like, oh hell yeah, like those look terrible, but I'm gonna say they look great, because I mean,
Yeah.
generally speaking, I haven't come across that.
Yeah,
No.
I guess if you're involved in some sort of community, whether it's criminal or otherwise, in the outside, you had the opportunity to give the okay on the hips and stuff. That was part of your little scam, but Yeah, I don't. I'm with you. I definitely know my vets would not. Would they would probably fire me as a client immediately if I was trying to slip them $100 bill for a clear test.
Yeah, and it's just interesting.
Yeah,
Like I guess it happens. I'd
yeah.
like to know the context of it. And again, just hey,
I'll send you. I'll send the article what I'm referring to. I don't want to say it here because YouTube's got some strict rules about talking
sure,
about that subject. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's kind of an interesting article, and I could see like if you're both involved in something as degenerate as what I'm referring to, and what's the difference of you giving somebody a free clear on an OFA because you're what you're doing besides that is way worse.
yeah,
Yeah, but it was interesting because they could everybody involved in this little situation I'm referring to was definitely heavily into the show world.
yeah, yeah. There was quite a scandal just recently
Yeah,
where they, then we're calling for these people that are in those worlds to, have to pass background checks. Which I mean, that just makes sense. Like, I mean, I think you've got anything where you're inviting juniors or children, there should be some degree of
yeah,
checking to make sure that everybody's above the board. Like, you don't want to put them more at risk. And who takes care of the dogs at home?
yeah.
That's my question. I'm sure they've got people.
I know this last go around for me was having people watch my dogs, or it was almost as expensive as the whole trip itself.
Yeah, yeah. So if you have
So
like a whole, working kennel of dogs, like how does that work?
yeah,
It's interesting.
yeah,
Those are the kinds of things we need people to tell us. So people like, how the heck? How do you do this?
yeah. The couple that
Logistically, I can't wrap my mind around it because just me working full time and then coming home and taking care of all my dogs. And like, I mean, I don't have time to do anything other than that. Keep my house semi clean, take care of all my dogs, and work so that we can eat.
yeah,
That's it. That's all I got.
yeah.
So
If I had if I had somebody paying my bills, I would sacrifice and go to all the shows I could. Right.
yeah, I don't know if I'd go to dog shows. I might go to beaches,
Yeah.
but that's just I've always enjoyed watching more, and I can appreciate the training aspect of shows, but they're they're a little dull to me. That's terrible. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, but I always appreciated more like watching training aspects of things, even though that's just as dull probably. But watching agility or watching any of the obedience or rally or anything where they've had to take the time to really that minute training and that type of bond is really a little more interesting to me to watch. I mean, there is a bond between a handler and a conformation dog for sure, but I like a little more action.
Yeah. Uh, I I guess I like the minutia of watching the handler take their dog, and then the the judge look over the dog attentively, and I like seeing that interaction of all the different breeds of how they interact with that sort of thing with the handler or the judge. And but I guess what interests me the most would be probably what goes on outside the ring, just kind of the camaraderie you might get from that, and the networking and meeting people. But I'm sure that's the pitfalls too.
Yeah, like anything.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. So what if it wasn't French bulldogs? What would it be?
Oh golly, I don't know. I really don't know. at this point. I've thought about that off and on, and I can't tell you that I have a good answer. I think I would go with something that can whelp naturally.
Yeah.
For sure. That would be a big plus. I wouldn't want a lot of hair. I would never want to sell people coated dogs, although people love coated dogs. It's just not, dogs that have to be groomed.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do that. It would be hard. And that's just knowing how that goes down, generally speaking. Once they leave and they go to their owner, and then the grooming situation is just, whew. Not to say not all owners are like that, but it is an expense and a task that a lot don't prepare for, and then they don't prepare their dog for it. So it can be a nightmare.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'd probably, if I was younger, and what I know, if I knew then what I know now, I'd probably go with something like a Staffy Bull. Good sized dog. I mean, perfect, not big. Has an off switch, even though it's a little more sharper than other breeds. I would probably go with the Staffy Bull. I really like those sport mixes.
Yeah, they're interesting. A lot of different mixes with that are interesting. An interesting group of people, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
In that community, and the different things that they look for, and what they're breeding for. And all that's super interesting.
And why they chose the bloodlines they did. And, yeah.
And the amount of titling, those dogs are heavily titled, generally speaking, in their whatever it is, the sport that they. That's an intense group.
Yeah, I've tried to reach out a couple times. Nothing yet. I might try that again because I really am interested in their, not necessarily like the inner workings of their sport, but just their dogs and why they chose the particular mix and all that.
Yeah.
Because they do
it'd
have.
be interesting to know like how they pair them up too, as far as like, this one doesn't have as much of an off switch, like as far as that'd be something I would be curious about. Like, how do they make? They're all health tested probably to the nines, just because of the sheer athleticism of them, and they want to make sure that they're sound and not doing a disservice to a potential buyer who wants to participate as intently as these people do in their sports.
Yeah.
Because they are intense. I would be curious, like, how they decide personality-wise, I guess, how to pair them up and what they're looking for.
And how they figure out that would be the good mix, like a Whippet, Border Collie, Border Terrier, Staffy Bull. How did they figure that those kinds of mixes? Like, what was their? I mean, I can't imagine putting a Border Collie to anything.
Yeah.
I love those dogs. I mean, I've been around them a lot. My mom had them before she passed. They're great dogs, but holy crap, are they intense! I mean, I'd sit in the recliner, and her female would try to herd me in the recliner. I'm like, I'm just sitting here.
Yeah. I mean, the sheer nature of what they have to do is gonna, that weeds them out pretty quick. So I guess you could say, if you had somebody doing generations of those, how much do you need that? I don't know, but I think in that community, it is a big deal because of the work that they ask those dogs to do.
Mm-hmm. Just the training aspect has got to be intense.
Yeah, they're intense people. I
Yeah.
can tell you. my friend
They're-
is my friend is one, and it's like, oof. I mean, like her dog has more manners in one whisker than my dog has in its whole body. Like,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Just don't look at that one over there. Look at the smart one there. That's.
Yeah.
But she's also done a lot of work with her dogs, and it shows. So.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not. Those people aren't driving 1,000 miles to meet up with friends and have a good time. They're there to win.
Yeah, or at least, no, she's not so much a she's always competing against herself for sure.
Right. Okay.
I don't know
Yeah.
how I don't really know how they decide. They they have different levels of that they have to go through, which is interesting too, and would be interesting in a podcast. Like, what's the basics? I guess you probably just read that, but like, how do you get somewhere and go? I could give you the recommendation of a girl that might be a good person to ask, because she
Yeah.
actually runs Frenchies in Boston.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah. I'll send you that privately. She does lots and lots of sports, dog sports. So I think I think if you could, consistently have a Frenchie that is getting, fast cat titles, you're doing some indication. Now, granted, that's a sprint, but
Yeah.
you're doing some indication of respiratory function. And you can certainly use that to see how quickly they recover and make your own judgments too. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
now the person that I know that does, the crazy competitive sports will not run her dogs in fast cats, because she doesn't want that just mindless craziness. She wants a more intentional, focused decision making process with the dog. She doesn't just want pure madness.
No.
So it's an interesting,
Yeah.
you know.
So, so fast cats for the dummy handlers and
Yeah.
the,
I mean,
and
I
the
think
dummy dogs.
some of those people certainly have done things to make it easier or get better or do whatever.
Yeah.
But it really is, it's fun. It's fun to watch the dogs. That is enjoyable. It's not, it's not a long thing that you're having to watch. So, and the dogs usually look like they're just having a blast. So
Yeah.
it's just a fun little activity for sure. But
It seems.
it can get expensive as well. But
Yeah, I'm sure. And
it is something that's definitely a good thing to dabble in and start with.
Okay.
Because again, the gal that I know, she's got mixes, and they have to be fixed in order to compete in AKC agility,
Right.
which is a bummer for her.
Yeah, because
She,
you purposely bred dogs are good dogs, and if that's what your thing is, you're breeding to a standard. You're not probably more so than maybe some of your show dogs.
yeah, it's a different, it's a competition standard. So
Yeah.
in order to get a PAL number, I think that's the correct word. Like, to get a registration in AKC as a mixed breed, they have to be a neutered dog or spayed dog. So that, I mean, even in the case of some of these, like if you had, she just simply doesn't like to neuter them until they're mature. So, not that she's opposed to neutering them, she just doesn't want to do it until they're a little bit older.
What would you say the sweet spot for that is?
Oh God, I don't know that I have a sweet spot. I think it's very individual, is what I'm going to tell you. Depending on the household and the family that has the dog, the behaviors that the dog might exhibit, how well they can manage it. I mean, I think it's very, very individual, and not sure that I do think that the larger breeds definitely, development wise, look better when they're left intact to mature out. But I think that can be a lot for some people to handle.
Yeah.
So
if they need to do it at whatever age, just try your best not to judge. There's a reason. You can only educate, and then again, everybody's different in what they can handle in their household.
Right.
And having a one size fits all approach to that really is not beneficial to, I don't think, anybody, dog, person, anybody. Got to kind of take stock of the situation. Just to be cut and dry about that for sure, but I'm not anymore. To me, it's getting to know the person and what it is in their household lifestyle, and then getting to know the dog and how it's maturing and what's happening, and you know, how to make everybody as happy as possible and as safe as possible. Risks to everything. So how do you try to find the balance between, you know, each client and pet?
Mm-hmm.